El Salvador. Until the late 1970s, its socio-economic problems weren't much different than those of its neighbors in Central America. However, since 1980, an ongoing political and military conflict has created new conditions which have deepened the critical poverty already suffered by part of the country's population. The most dramatic of these conditions is the uprooting of an entire sector of the population that, fleeing from the life-threatening violence, have migrated to other parts of the country. These are the displaced. Others have fled abroad, acquiring the status of refugees or becoming simply illegal aliens. Their decision to leave home is a spontaneous one. Their only goal is to find a future with a minimum of security. Without any plan or any kind of organization, their destiny is left to chance. Because of the country's conditions, with great problems of poverty and the highest population density in Latin America, the internally displaced have become the largest sector of the population unable to satisfy its most basic needs. Of a population of only 5 million, 500,000 are displaced, 10% of all the inhabitants of El Salvador. 40% of the displaced lack any kind of access to health services. Their levels of malnourishment and infant mortality surpass national averages. More than 50% are illiterate, with a total lack of educational opportunities and without physical or monetary resources. 3 out of 4 persons of working age have no employment opportunities. More than half of their houses are built from rubble, amidst appalling environmental and health conditions and a lack of basic services. The occurrence of a social issue in El Salvador, such as the displaced, was unpredictable. Its magnitude or its duration could not have been foreseen. At the beginning, the problem was considered transitory. Emergency measures were taken: food assistance, temporary shelter, clothing, medicine. These actions avoided a major catastrophe. Nonetheless, in 1985, the problems of the displaced remained critical. The magnitude of the affected population and the diversity of their problems and needs go beyond those of a transitory and emergency situation. The political-military conflict continues. In addition to the typical problems of poverty, new ones have been added. Temporary settlements are now becoming permanent. Within these, the size and age of the families have changed. Some of yesterday's children are now parents. The contact with urban lifestyles has changed the expectations of the displaced of rural origin. Their consciousness of their own condition strengthens a self-image of being the poorest of the poor. Major changes are evident in the shape and service of some cities, especially the capital. There is also a deepening of social problems. And more importantly, dependency and passivity have begun to emerge as normal behavior among the displaced. As a result of this situation, the Sub-Ministry of Social Development of El Salvador, together with some international agencies, such as the World Food Program, began to reformulate food assistance programs, tying them to development projects for communities of the displaced. In 1986, the United Nations Development Program and the International Labor Organization developed a project to involve the displaced in productive activities, with support from the Ministry of Planning and the Sub-Ministry of Social Development in El Salvador. The purpose of this project is to develop a set of procedures which support the displaced families and their communities, allowing them to be the principal players in resolving their problems and helping them design and execute their own development activities.
Bueno, había que consultar al veterinario a ver, ¿verdad? Ellos pueden tener, ¿verdad? Más estudios sobre eso, ¿verdad?
Conceived as a pilot project in its first stage, the project covered 250 families located in 5 settlements. This coverage was later extended to 400 families. The technical nucleus of the project consisted of a multidisciplinary team responsible for motivation and training of families and communities.
Que ellas tienen en cuanto a tipo, rapidez de crecimiento, la cantidad de tetas, ¿verdad? Que es la adecuada para ser una buena reproductora.
The leaders and members of the communities selected participated in an information exchange on the characteristics of the project. This was followed by a social and labor assessment in each community.
What this project will do is see what potential you have and what needs you have, so that we together, you, the community, your needs, and our team, will be able to coordinate and support you so that you can all get ahead. This way, we can undertake productive projects, projects for women, projects to make the earth more fertile, and be able to have a better standard of living and improve your housing and your living conditions.
This approach resulted in the identification of problems and the allocation of community priorities. It also allowed the community leaders to become familiar with techniques for appraising their needs.
El alimento que estamos consumiendo a diario. Pero no basta esto para obtener una dieta alimenticia que satisfaga en cierta medida nuestra dieta familiar diaria.
Later, the community in each settlement prepared a specific work plan and formed various committees to put these plans in action.
Yo creo que eso ahora cuando nos visite el señor veterinario que nos está asesorando aquí, vamos a poner.
These committees contributed to activities for the development of productive and income-generating projects and made important advances in solving their health problems.
Capacitado como colaborador voluntario en salud.
I was trained as a health promoter, and after training, I gave talks every Sunday in regard to personal hygiene and nutrition, and also about keeping a clean environment.
However, the lack of resources of the displaced is a critical factor which severely limits their initiatives. For this reason, the project established a rotating communal fund which is administered by the displaced communities and permits them to open lines of credit for the income-generating activities proposed by their members. Each community has elected a credit committee, which is responsible for the distribution of resources from the communal rotating fund to invest in productive projects on an individual, family, or cooperative basis. This fund was created not only to stimulate the capitalization of the community, but also to serve as a lever to obtain credit from regular sources.
I own a small store. It is a very small business, and unfortunately, it's always short on resources, and with the money that was lent to me by the committee, I could reinforce it and have enough stock and get a wider selection of goods, so that the business is working very well now.
The loans have been repaid, and we have made new loans, and everyone has made their payments promptly, as it should be.
These are only samples of projects already being implemented. Fishing projects using canoes and trammel nets, and commercialization of the product in the community named Relocation 3 in Chlaltenango, north of San Salvador. Processing and sale of plastic and leather goods, and the establishment of a nixtamil corn mill. Both are in Guadalupe, a suburban community on the outskirts of the capital, San Salvador. The establishment of a communal center at El Perpetuo, a suburban settlement in the metropolitan area. Cooperative farming projects, owned and worked by different groups of women in the community known as the Planta Nueva Cooperative in the western area of the country. Farming of cereals and other crops at Las Flores Cooperative in the central area of the country. In addition to these income-generating projects, others have been designed with the aim of improving the basic diet of the displaced. Likewise, significant progress toward improved housing can be seen in a settlement located in the western area of the country. These houses were built entirely by the community of the Planta Nueva Cooperative. Supported by the project and through the Learn While Doing method, this cooperative organized itself to build safe, low-cost construction using local materials. Since the initial phase of the project, involving 400 families in 5 settlements, proved successful, the project will now expand in a second phase to cover 25,000 families in 300 settlements of displaced persons throughout the country. The pilot project has shown that the community is able to act on behalf of its own development when resources and training support are added to strengthen its own organization. This is one of the most important contributions of the project, the first phase of which ends in 1988.
Entonces, después siguen los comités. Aquí existe un comité.
These experiences have taught an important lesson. When a displaced population's organization, initiative, and communal capabilities are developed, they become interested in seeking and trying new solutions, for which they need support.
Pero sí vamos a seguir dándole todo lo que necesita para mantenerla limpia, para mantenerla en buen estado.
The efficiency of this support in such a large displaced population cannot be achieved through isolated actions. That is why it was necessary to prepare a new tool that would incorporate the coordinated assistance and support of the different international agencies, state institutions, and other entities willing to collaborate. A tool which integrates otherwise isolated efforts and resources, avoids duplication, and eliminates confusion in the communities faced with a variety of organizations and offers of assistance. This new tool is PRODERI, the development program for the displaced, refugees, and repatriates in El Salvador. Designed by the Salvadoran government and the United Nations Development Program with the support of different specialized agencies, PRODERI uses experience validated in El Salvador by these agencies and their various governmental counterparts, especially those of the International Labor Organization project. The project was unanimously approved by the United Nations General Assembly on May 12, 1988. Its aims fall within the international agreement supporting efforts for Central American peace and development. Its objectives are to improve health and sanitation, employment, production and income, housing, education, and nutrition among the displaced. PRODERI represents the first experience of international and national agencies organized with the common objective of supporting displaced communities in El Salvador.
The idea of PRODERI is appropriate. We understand that health, in its wider interpretation, is linked to all other factors of social development, so that if social development is in crisis, if we have problems of unemployment, education, security, then we are going to have health problems. Those factors that determine the state of health will have to be modified if we want our work in the health field to succeed. A person who doesn't eat well, sleep well, or live well cannot work well. What we mean to say with this is that it is necessary and important to assure this improvement of living conditions so we can strengthen the opportunities of every man and woman to develop their economic capacity. This way, they can provide themselves with an income that will allow them to fulfill all their basic needs, as well as those of their children. If we are able to provide, through our UN programs in this country, a comprehensive package of aid that will address the real needs of the displaced population, respecting at the same time the development plans of the governments, and that is well coordinated, then maybe, and it is our hope, that all donors will be able to choose from within this package the type of aid they are more suited to offer, so they will be able to contribute to this effort that we are all making. In other words, simply, I believe that we can orient this massive aid, which now is not very well coordinated, in order to help with this critical problem.
In order for self-sufficiency and development to remain effective in these communities, continuous support on a national level is needed, so this project can benefit from multi-agency actions and cooperation from other countries.
I believe that with the support of the UN and with that of all organizations that are involved in this project, that aims to centralize all resources, will be of the utmost importance for us to be able to help with social workers, organizers, and agricultural technicians. In this way, we can formalize our assistance and contribute to the groups in need through this program. Undoubtedly, there is a great potential here in El Salvador to develop, through Prodere, programs geared to the promotion of small and micro business enterprises. The Salvadorian has a tradition that can facilitate his incorporation into the economic process. Undoubtedly, through the small businesses and the micro industries, we can achieve great goals. This country has done it before, and now, in this time of crisis, when we need it the most, we think that this program will orient us toward the economic recovery in El Salvador. The effort, the support, international cooperation will have to play a vital role. The political commitment and the political will of this government and of the next governments in El Salvador will have to be present and be extremely firm. But together with this, we will need all the possible cooperation that we can obtain. When I refer to cooperation, I am referring to not only financial aid, but also training, technical cooperation, and cultural cooperation. In other words, everything, every tool and means that will allow a human being the opportunity to develop and live as a real human being is meant to live.
Prodere is geared toward answering the principal problems of the displaced populations in El Salvador. Its methods can also be used to improve the country's poorest sector. This way, the project also transcends national borders and could lead to the improvement of living conditions of other people in Central America.